Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, June 19, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, author of South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation. On Juneteenth, why it exists, what utility it has in our society, and more. Also on the program today, new reporting, FBI and the DOJ resisted investigating Trump's role in January 6th for a year.
Thank God for Merrick Garland. Just kidding. Useless.
Turns out that when it looks like the DOJ is doing nothing, it is actually not a secret plan to do something. Meanwhile, Blinken and Xi pledged to stabilize Chinese-American ties. Government shutdown seeming more likely in the wake of a debt ceiling deal that was ostensibly negotiated to avoid a government shutdown.
How the Republicans go back on their word?
Scientists freaking out even more than normal over warming records that appeared to have begun to outpace our models. Medicaid purge grows. Well over 1 million have lost health care in the past 2 months. DOJ report on Minneapolis police is scathing. Reform negotiations begin between the city and the feds. A new Texas law will slash labor protections locally, including ordinances that allow construction workers 10-minute water breaks. New study shows gas stoves release benzenes at levels comparable to secondhand smoke. Lastly, jurors convict the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, June 19th, Juneteenth. Federal holiday for many, but not for Emma Vigeland.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Or Matt Leck.
Or Matt Leck.
Or Bradley
Alsop. Or myself.
It's no problem.
Yeah. So fun day Monday.
Fun day Monday. No school. Do we have mail delivery? I don't think we do, right? Federal holiday. And so on. This is a new holiday as of...
no, yeah, it seems U.S.
2 years ago.
Postal Service office is not open today.
It's a new holiday as of this is the second year I think that we're celebrating it, or I guess maybe I think the first year
It was an observed.
Okay.
It fell on a weekend, I believe, last year.
Okay.
So.
Well, Josh Hawley has something for us to keep in mind. Today is a good day to remember Christianity is the faith and America is the place slavery came to die. So
there you go.
So,
I mean,
after it flourished, it also died here. So we deserve credit for that part.
It also
were
where
kinda
slavery
late.
came to die. I mean, we were one of the last countries to get rid of slavery.
Yes.
So I guess in that sense,
we did beat Brazil by a few decades, but
that's good.
We were behind like Britain, for instance.
yeah,
Yes.
that's an interesting construction where
Right.
slavery came to die. Also, you could say the same thing about like, I don't know, a cancer when it takes the life of somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's just a weird construction. But nevertheless, it is Juneteenth. We're going to be talking to Imani Perry on it. It's interesting, the development of a new holiday, and interesting to think about, why we have it and what it hopefully will function to do. But let's hear, because we are all about hearing both sides of an argument. One is, should we celebrate the end of slavery in this country, and or the ostensible end of slavery in this country, or is it an evil plot? Well, let's give some equal time to the evil plot side of the argument. I give you, ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Kirk, the would-be Rush Limbaugh.
Some of you will be listening to this episode as it airs on Juneteenth. The heck is Juneteenth? It depends who you ask.
Pause it for 1 second. I guess he took it off. I guess he took today off. Weird, but okay.
That's funny. Also, like, maybe like schooling is good for something. We should like kids should know what Juneteenth is.
No, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. That sounds like critical race theory to me.
Some of you will be listening to this episode as it airs on Juneteenth. The heck is Juneteenth? It depends who you ask, okay? But let's talk about what it actually is. And we opposed Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday as it happened. And yes, it is the day that it is mandatory to work at Turning Point USA. We're going to talk about it actually on the day. I say we're given multiple days off for our actual Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. Why is Juneteenth a problem? Not because, again, it's so subversive. On its face value, I have no problem with it. I think it's wonderful to say, okay, liberation of slaves, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. The issue is that the entire point of it, as per postmodernists do and deconstructionists, is to subvert July 4th. That has always been the agenda. That there is a Black Independence Day and a National Independence Day. The same way that they have a black national anthem that plays before NFL games. That they have black-only dormitories and black-only math classes. It is a neo-segregationist federal holiday, is what it is. And they're so tricky, aren't they? Because they say, oh, Charlie, you against the emancipation of slaves? Of course we're not against that, because that's not what this is about. This is a summertime competitor to create multiple Independence Days to further deteriorate, erode, and destroy the celebration of our actual Independence Day. I tweeted this out in 2021. In 2021...
Summertime competitor. Like, it's like the XFL versus the NFL. They're coming for our football.
Hey, guys, I know we were going to barbecue on the 4th, but I'm sorry, I did it in the middle of June, so don't want to do it today.
That was how segregation the first time was instituted, was they did their own, the white people, Jim Crowites, did their own holiday, and then what happens when you do your own holiday is naturally it creates its own gravity.
I'll tell you something. We had I don't know where the fireworks were the other night for Flag Day, and I'm like,
this is subverting.
Don't need July 4th.
I mean, isn't Hanukkah a wintertime competitor to Christmas?
I mean,
are you trying to subvert?
Actually, Charlie will argue that too.
He would, and you know what? It's a good thing that it subverts Christmas a little. I'm glad that if we're trying to cut into the fanciful notion that July 4th was Independence Day with another holiday that recognizes that it wasn't actually Independence Day because there was slavery in this country. Yeah. I'm all for undercutting our mythology about this country because it is exclusionary and it is just that, a myth.
Infantile. Like, again, like right. Josh Hawley mentioning us getting rid of slavery. We did, like, in 1820, there's an essay from a Scottish guy saying America says they're so independent and freedom-loving, and they are all slave drivers.
Right. Let's. Do we have any more of this? Let's keep playing. Yeah, because the interesting thing is we'll see how much it becomes about ideological. But I also have another theory that these type of attacks sort of force the interpretation of June 19th into a box that doesn't do the work that it should be doing.
One, I tweeted out, making Juneteenth a federal holiday isn't about emancipation of slaves. If it was, they would make September 22nd Emancipation Proclamation Day a federal holiday. This is about replacing July 4th, just like the 1619 Project is about replacing 1776. Conservatives must reject this. So yeah, I mean, if they want to make an Emancipation Day, just make September 22nd a federal holiday. But now we have a full week of Juneteenth festivities.
He would not support that either.
A full week.
I feel like he didn't.
We have a
work
whole
on
month
this
during
enough.
Pride Month, and at some point, you got to wonder. And the answer to the question is actually very simple. Why do these people need so much celebration? Why do these people need so many rituals? And the answer is super simple.
These people.
It's because they're not religious. Well, they're religious in their own way, but
Oh my God.
those of us that go to church, we're part of something. Those of us that, if you're an observant Jew, so if you
God kept him from finishing that statement.
Yes, thank you.
What's amazing is how convoluted his critique is here. Like, he would prefer this back in September. So he is literally talking about the close proximity to July 4th, undercuts July 4th. But if it was in September, it wouldn't undercut July 4th. So it's not so much an ideological thing as literally
Proximity.
It literally, like, you know, it's not a summer thing. But of course, a lot of kids still in school now, not in July, which he's not contemplating that. And then he's sort of like roping it into Pride Month and saying the real problem is that people aren't religious enough. Like, as if like, rates of religion amongst black people relatively high in this country. It's unclear to me. Like, it's so convoluted here what he's talking about. Why do religious people have to celebrate the 4th? Wouldn't that keep them from celebrating the 4th? If under his theory, it's.
But what he needs to say is, like, we actually are the authors of history and black people are doing it wrong.
Exactly.
Right. The subtext of everything he's saying is that I don't want another reminder for the general public that we enslaved a certain segment of the population, and no one's precluding precluding you from also recognizing it and taking Juneteenth to have these kinds of conversations. It's not exclusionary in the way he describes, but it is when you have a reactionary mind.
I think one of the things, and I think this is worth actually talking to Imani Perry about, despite the fact that I'm hesitant to mention the words Charlie Kirk in front of her. There is a reason why Juneteenth is celebrated as opposed to the Emancipation Proclamation Day, and that is because slaves were not freed when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced. In fact, the relationship of black people to white people was not cured on Juneteenth either, for that matter. And I do think that the real issue they have with Juneteenth is that it makes it clear that the United States never achieved the aspirational or supposed things that we set out to do supposedly in that regard. And we'll talk more about it with Imani Perry in a moment. A couple of words from our sponsors. Don't forget, this show has been sponsored by JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate for its entire run. It's the only advertisement we've had from the beginning. Great coffee. They're a co-op out of Madison, Wisconsin. They were giving out free coffee as far back as the protests against Scott Walker. And they have a majority report blend that they've had for 11 years. So check it out. Get 10% off with the coupon code majority. Also, this show is sponsored today by Zippix. They are nicotine toothpicks designed to help you stop putting smoke and vape in your lungs. Super hard to get off of nicotine. I've been there, folks. I smoked for decades. And I tried a ton of different things. As far as I know, these didn't exist at the time. But if anybody watches the show on a regular basis, you see I still am chomping on toothpicks all the time. If you feel that it is time for you to stop putting smoke and vape oils in your lungs, you can get your nicotine fix without having to rely on smoking and vaping. Zippix toothpicks give you an easier and healthier, more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 flavors. They have options in 2 milligrams and 3 milligrams of nicotine, so you can sort of like wean yourself off. And then once you've weaned yourself off or you're ready to jump off of the nicotine, you can try their caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks, which I'm chomping on a regular basis. Can't find my container right now. They come in, they have containers like this, and I have that great wood container that is. But they're great in that respect, and it will help you get away from that nicotine habit. Zippix has already helped tens of thousands of customers leading a healthier lifestyle. And if you currently smoke or vape, they can probably help you too. Make your lungs happy. Try Zippix nicotine toothpicks. You ditch the cigarettes, you ditch the vape. Get some nicotine infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code majority at checkout. Your lungs, and frankly, your family and your future family and everybody around you and your significant other, if you have one, are going to be glad you did. And a disclaimer, this product contains nicotine, which is an addictive chemical. You must be 21 or older to order. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. We'll put the link in our podcast and YouTube description. And a quick break, and we'll be right back with Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. Right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It's a real pleasure to welcome to the program Imani Perry. She's a professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. Her most recent book, South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to Understand the Soul of a Nation. Professor, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Before I mentioned, before our break that I was going to bring up Charlie Kirk to you, I'm going to hold off for a moment so that, but again, apologies for that. But let's just, this is the second year, I think, that we are actually observing Juneteenth. It was declared a holiday, I guess, 3 years ago on the 21st. 2021. I'm confused about how that works in terms of the time. But just give us what the ostensibly this holiday is celebrating.
Right. So it's a portmanteau of June and 19th, and it's celebrating when General Granger made his way into Galveston, Texas, and declared enslaved people free. Now, that was 2 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and it was a sort of the last official order of the Civil War that allowed people who were enslaved to actually experience what it was to be emancipated. And of course, it celebrates that in a sort of, it is appropriate that it's a celebration, but it wasn't sort of easily executed freedom. There were people who tried to re-enslave folks. There were still skirmishes. There was violence, and of course, there were black codes almost immediately afterwards. And really, it required both the 13th and 14th Amendment to begin to even experience freedom substantively. But it was the day that they call the Day of Jubilee in Texas historically. And it spread to some adjacent states. And there you have Juneteenth.
This is where I'll bring up Charlie Kirk, because I just read a piece by Peniel Joseph in the Texas Monthly, and I can't remember when we had him on, but he argues that it's more than likely that the people in Galveston, that slaves in Galveston knew of the Emancipation Proclamation, and that. So it wasn't as if, this was a surprise and it was, and clearly they had to lay low in that instance. How much of citing Juneteenth as the day, as the holiday to sort of ostensibly celebrate the end of slavery is a function of the idea that like this is sort of more of a process than a thing that actually has happened?
Oh, absolutely. It was a process. I mean, the process is so protracted. I mean, in many ways, you can say that the process continued into the mid 20th century because, the rights that were guaranteed by the Civil War and the Reconstruction Amendments actually aren't fully protected until the mid 20th century. Reconstruction is such a brief period. So I think that's right. It was a process, but there is this culture that develops in Black communities, and Juneteenth is one example, of simultaneously celebrating moments of progress, even when struggle persists, right? I mean, Memorial Day has that origin. There were Emancipation Day celebrations in other parts of the country. So watch night services historically, all in it beginning roughly in the same period. So Juneteenth in some ways is sort of like, it's both an actual holiday, it's symbolic, but absolutely it's a sign of a kind of holiday that's always in process, as opposed to this idea that here one and done, freedom came and everything was glorious afterwards. Absolutely not that.
To build off that point too, I mean, to me, embedded in it is this notion of freedom delayed, right? Where if the powers that be have said, the Emancipation Proclamation, the slaves are freed, and then 2.5 years later, that's when it is announced to people in Galveston, and there's a symbolism in that as well, where freedom as written down on paper is not freedom in practice. And that's, I think, what's beautiful, I guess, about Juneteenth being the celebration as opposed to, of course, it being the Emancipation Proclamation Day.
I think that's right. And I think that's also really important because one of the things that we often miss is how integral enslaved people were in their own emancipation. So you only get from 1863 to 1865 because of the vast numbers of Black people who went and joined the Union Army and the Union Navy. And after, especially after Antietam, the impact of their participation in the Civil War was essential. And so it's freedom delayed, and it also is freedom that required people to free themselves.
Mm. Let's talk a little bit about how, we got to how Juneteenth became a holiday, because as a kid, I mean, I don't know if I had gone to high school or junior high in Texas, I would have heard about it as a white kid. I have no idea. I can say as growing up in Massachusetts as a kid, nothing. No. I mean, I frankly, in my, I didn't even heard the word Reconstruction until I went to college, for that matter. But I have a better sense a little bit because I have kids of my own, but granted they're going to, school in New York. So maybe that's a little bit different. I don't know. But there has been a change over the past couple of decades. It feels like in terms of like history and our understanding of that era. Would you give us sort of like, I don't know, intellectual history development of this holiday and that history?
Yeah, I mean, so it is a holiday that is celebrated starting in 1866. It wanes in the late 19th century, but then begins to really pick up in the 60s in Texas, as well as Louisiana, and then some folks out in California, in part because of the way the Great Migration went west from Texas. And it gets a sort of revitalization in the late 20th century. But I didn't celebrate Juneteenth growing up at all. I was aware of Juneteenth programs here and there in Alabama, but really coastal further south. In Massachusetts, we celebrated Emancipation Day. We had Emancipation Day ceremonies, but never Juneteenth. So it's a recent, I think, sort of holiday of national recognition. And I do think, there's in some quarters, some appropriate skepticism of that, certainly from Texans who I know. But I think also it's sort of, there's a way in which it seems too easy particularly in this moment where we're experiencing so much sort of tension and conflict around the politics of race that in some ways it's like, it happened all of a sudden. I was sort of astonished.
It seemed to have come out of nowhere. I mean, even as an adult, like, I'm not even sure, even within the context of this show, which we've been doing for 12, 13 years, I don't think 12 years ago I had ever even heard the word Juneteenth.
Right. So I think the question is sort of how can we keep it from becoming something that is just a sort of empty symbol and actually use it as an occasion, particularly when we're in the midst of the culture wars and the cold civil war that we live in now. How do we allow it to be an occasion to be educated, but also to actually contest the refusal of the study of history and and the banning of books and the like?
Well, specifically that, I mean, in this moment of anti-critical race theory being this organizing force for the Republican Party, particularly on a local level, because they want to activate them to vote Republican. And if you're going to your school board and bitching about racism being taught in schools, you're probably going to vote. I mean, just talk about that importance too, because like the fact that this is such a new federal holiday and it's happening in this particular moment is key as well.
It is key. I mean, I think, one of the ways that we might think about it is that in the context, and we can take Florida as always the easy example, but if there is a prohibition on teaching this history, you're actually you have in some ways a kind of federalist crisis, right? A distinction, a sort of fundamental contestation between what is being celebrated on the federal level and what a state is insisting cannot be actually engaged historically at all. So you have from the White House the message, well, this is the second Independence Day, as it were, right? That Juneteenth celebrates the second Independence Day, and then you have at the state level people saying you absolutely cannot learn about this history. It's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, talk about that, the Juneteenth within the context of because we're in an era, right, where we have also followed where a lot of the Confederate statues have come down. Fort Bragg is getting renamed. I mean, it's almost like there's a sort of, I don't know, a mirror image to the 20s in the 1920s or the early 1920s or 19 teens where we've come out of Reconstruction and there's this resurgence of the KKK and all of these memorials start going up and there's an attempt to sort of establish the lost cause and to create a new revision of history. And now we sort of like a decade later, a century later, there is, I guess, the apparatus that controls or has more of a grip around history is like sort of pushing back on that, right? I mean, we're getting rid of the Dunning School as an interpretation of what happened, and but there is a huge blowback to that I don't know if there was a parallel to in those teens, because there wasn't an empowered sort of political force or cultural force at the time to complain about, like, hey, why are you putting up a statue of a Confederate general when, 40 years ago or 60 years ago, they were trying to overthrow the government? Like, what's going on here?
Right. I mean, what's interesting is that this is what, it's a fascinating era. So one of the consequences of digitization is that we have access to sort of vast numbers of Black newspapers from the 1920s. So there's a really robust conversation happening about the evil of the lost cause and the violence behind it, right? And so it's not recognized in the mainstream, but there is the conversation that's happening. And in some ways, the culture wars cycle every 30 years. I am increasingly of the mind that the way that we teach the history is not simply, this should be the master narrative of the nation or the consensus narrative, or that should be, but that it's actually the history, the story is the conflict, right? That there has been this sort of fundamental conflict from the very founding of the nation over who ought to count as citizens, over what the scope of membership is, over the recognition of human rights, of civil rights, and the like, and that's really the story, right? So the lost cause, the sort of the motif, the South shall rise again, repeats itself because we have this core ideological conflict, and that is part of the American story.
So if American history is these sort of like two major competing narratives that at various times and the story of our history is a product of that dynamic at any given time, where one narrative may have more the more cultural, like, what is it that when we look at that dynamic, like, what is it that we're saying that the narrative has? Like, are there components of society that, one narrative has captured for this particular era as opposed to the other narrative? Is it all just simply political power? Is there cultural power to it? I mean, I hate to refer to Charlie Kirk, but this segment we just played so laid out all of these issues, but from, a guy who wasn't quite, I think, conscious of the issues, but sort of reacting to them in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the narratives have beliefs behind them. And there's something instructive that one narrative wants to limit what people know in order to sustain the belief. And the other actually, at best, is encourages deeper investigation, right? And so the sort of anti-intellectualism, the anti-education disposition of the sort of lost cause idea, I think the way that, that those of us who believe in history and believe in truth and justice respond is to say, what are you so afraid of people knowing, right? But I do think, so I think it's political, and I think it has to do with power, but it also has to do with belief systems, right? At a very core level, right? And not just, we bandy about words like democracy, but the idea is what I think behind is what's the precondition for democracy, right? And the precondition for democracy is on a certain level, this question of who do you believe gets to participate, right? What are the conditions of participation? It's not just democracy isn't just the procedure, right? It's actually how do we get to the voting booth or whatever, or what have you, or the table, as it were. And so, so I think it's a combination in many ways of all of the things that you said.
I feel that it's immensely important that moments like this act as mythbusters too, because so much of like the white power structure wants to mythologize like the founding of this nation. It's the whole 1776 project nonsense, revisionist history, and why I feel this is, a more opportune moment than, say, Martin Luther King Day, where I feel like a massive section of the population has deified or like defanged him as well at the same time. This is much more of an opportunity to analyze that conflict that you describe and the ongoing nature of it, as opposed to presenting a figurehead and then saying, well, this person solved this, and then, okay, let's wash our hands of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that's right, to the extent that, because Juneteenth is new, it becomes an occasion to have a debate around it. I am also of the mind of, telling the truth about Dr. King and using, I think, and it's a really wonderful example that you give, though, because the way that he gets mythologized and actually defanged is by the taking of a sound bite. And I think similarly, the way that there are some folks talk about Juneteenth, as though it has no political content, has the potential of having that same kind of, kind of flattening of the legacy. And so, I do believe we can have this discussion around Juneteenth, and I hope that it encourages us to actually reevaluate all of the holidays, right? Reevaluate the Federalist Papers, it becomes an occasion to think differently about our past.
What is the way to sort of like maximize that utility? I mean, Charlie Kirk called this a neo-segregationist holiday. And that it was, I mean, the thing is, though, the way that he approached it was really fascinating to me, because he said it was meant to undercut July 4th. And I think on a sort of like an ideological, like intellectual level, that's an interesting sort of like thing to discuss, because Frederick Douglass's famous speech about like, this is not, it's Independence Day, but it's not. But then he sort of turned it into, just because of its close proximity in time to July 4th, that instead of it being sort of like a way to undercut the, to make July 4th more of a process day than a sort of, this is when we got, our liberation. But how, so on some level, I think like he's helping the utility of Juneteenth to, essentially make Americans look into their history and understand their country more. I don't think he meant to do that, but for those who don't perceive it as a neo-segregationist holiday, but rather one about, have a more nuanced and an ability, to have an awareness of what this country was sort of founded on and how long of a process it's been, and we're not there yet. I mean, how do we leverage that utility?
I mean, I think that you just offered a perfect example. Growing up, I was expected to read What to the Slave is the 4th of July, right? And the idea that and Independence Day, the 4th of July was a widely celebrated holiday in Black communities. Any day that's a day off for people who are hardworking is a widely celebrated holiday. And also, at least in the South, there was a kind of defiant patriotism that was associated with the 4th of July, right? And so, I mean, I think telling that story, right, of freedom, the founding of the nation is both a slave on the principles of liberty, but as a slave nation is an important lesson, right? And then to read, I mean, you could actually tell a story reading through the history of the antebellum South. You could tell a story you start with the Revolutionary War and about Black soldiers for British loyalists who were emancipated because they fought on the side of the crown. And some of whom went to England. You can talk about Crispus Attucks, and then you can talk about Frederick Douglass. Then you can actually sort of tell the story that takes us through the building of the wealth of the nation through cotton, right? And the expansion of slavery and the Indian removal, and then come to Juneteenth, right? And even then, it's a protracted struggle. But I do think that we actually should expect, whether it's part of history education or civics education, for people to understand the making of the nation without romance, but with some sort of really important signposts about what these principles actually mean. The 14th Amendment is huge in our sort of day-to-day lives, but we don't tend to know, right, how we got there. Right, that kind of robust citizenship actually comes through the Civil War.
How much does in your estimation, does class and just capitalism play within that narrative over the years? I mean, and how much of it do you see? that there is an attempt or a failure to an attempt to decouple those ideas or a failure to connect those ideas?
Both. How much time do we have?
Really, a lot of time.
Capitalism in class is everywhere. It's both in the history, not just of the exploitation, of Black labor, but in the exploitation of white labor and the use of race as, and Du Bois talked about this, the wages of whiteness is the one sort of for poor and working class white Americans, the one thing they had in this culture that actually, not only dissociated poor and working class people from each other on the basis of race, but actually set up a logic of competition so that you have some of the most sort of impassioned defenders of the logic of white supremacy being people who are relatively vulnerable because of a fear that if they lose the benefits of whiteness, they have nothing in a society that is so profoundly unequal. To me, and this is part of what I tried to write about in South to America, that also has to be told as part of the story, right? That it is not enough to, and in some ways it's cruel to just point a finger at, the poor and working class white Southerner and say, well, see, they're the racists, without realizing that was actually the seduction that to keep them away from advocating from class interests often. So, it has a lot to do with, and this is part of why I also think we should be learning about the mining wars as part of the history of this country. We fail on working class history too.
Why do you think that there's been, and the Alabama, where I would say is the sort of the pivot point maybe of your book. Why do you think there has been such a failure over time, or maybe failure is the wrong word? Why has it been so unsuccessful in creating a broader awareness of that concept of the wages of whiteness and how it's been used in the context of exploitation? Like, we had, I cannot remember the author's name now, but Hammer and Hoe, was it
Robin Kelly?
Yeah, we had Robin on to discuss that book, and obviously it looks at Alabama, and it looks like the sort of like attempt to sort of create a solidarity amongst the white and Black working class. What has to happen before that sort of concept, or what hasn't happened, or why has it still today so easy for conservative, reactionary, revanchist, whatever you want to call them, forces to exploit that?
I think the easiest way to answer, and of course it's not an easy answer, but is that race is so deeply embedded in the logic and the patterns of behavior and the habits of Americans that it can be deployed at the blink of an eye. And it becomes very hard to overcome. And then that combined with, in the current political economy, in the context of sort of late capitalism and neoliberalism, where there's virtually no safety net, where there is a sort of competitive logic, everything is marketized, people are really terrified of giving up even the most modest advantage that they might have. And so even the sort of minutia of stratification, and I think this is across the board, people clutch on to. We see some powerful counterexamples, though, with the growing sort of labor movement. So I don't want to diminish that, because I think it's a very exciting turn in this country. And as this sort of labor movement emerges, they are heavily multiracial groups of people. And so hopefully, I guess we should try to invest in those moments, and perhaps by emphasizing the history, right, we give sort of fuel to those growing movements.
Well, it's fascinating stuff, and I guess it's just going to be ongoing, and I guess we'll, maybe 10 years into the celebration of Juneteenth, we'll have a better notion of because it could go both ways, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It could just end up being, I don't know, like most of our holidays where it's just Juneteenth sale and
excuse to drink or
this
something.
Is appliances, and
right.
It just, that's when we freed the slaves, and we're done.
Well, it will almost certainly be that. And then the question will be, will those of us who want it to be more, will we do something, right? It'll certainly be that. We see it already. There's lots of Juneteenth sales. But the question is, what is our responsibility in the face of our present moment and our really extremely painful history?
Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. We'll put a link to South to America, A Journey Below the Mason-Dixon to understand the soul of a nation. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right, folks. Going to take a little break. Head into the fun half of the program. We will take your phone calls. We will take your IMs. And just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free part of the program, free of commercials, but you also get to the fun half. And also, during the live show, you can use the app to IM the fun half of the program. JustCoffee.coop, Fred Trade Coffee, Tea, or Chocolate, coupon code majority. Don't forget the Discord, majoritydiscord.com. Almost 9,000. I think we're probably at 9,000 members of our Discord now.
Wow.
It's like a small city. And
that's bigger than most towns in North Dakota, all but like maybe 15.
There you go. We could just move the Discord, maybe take over the entire state.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to build housing for that many people on such short notice, but we'll give it a shot.
Small, tiny houses. We'll live in a bunch of tiny homes.
This sounds like a dystopia.
Yeah, I saw some of those on Airbnb. I feel like people just go to them for an Instagram aesthetic.
Yes.
It's like, why is it $600 a night for a tiny home in the middle of the woods?
You don't want a tiny home in North Dakota in the winter because you got to be inside for a lot.
We just need to, we'll have it on closed circuit. The Majority Report would just be playing over and over again every day.
Our interview with our 215 interviews with libertarians.
Exactly. Exactly. Also, don't forget AM Quickie, amquickie.com. Head over there, sign up for the AM Quickie. You'll get 3 newsletters a week for free. Top stories of the day, of the week. And then you can sign up to get it 5 days a week.
A bunch of people are excited because they thought that was a pre-recorded interview, and now they realize we're live.
Oh, they thought that was
I
pre-recorded?
thought we had the day off and pre-recorded that, but actually, no, we're here, folks. Looking for you.
Have we pre-recorded in the past?
Not for Juneteenth.
But now it's a federal holiday.
Well, but the thing is, it's like it's a new holiday and trying to get, people to know what's going on.
Right.
I got to figure out, when we get to take it off.
You mean, right.
When we get to take it off.
When we get to take it off.
So most of my friends have today off, I just got to say, and then I was like, oh, I'm coming in, I have work, and they were like, your job has work? I was
it's people don't know enough about the holiday.
I know.
Well, and it's too good of an idea. But maybe what we should do is just do the Juneteenth interview on the Friday before or on the Tuesday after or whatever, the day after, and take it off.
And play it as if it's live.
Just something to think about for next year.
Yeah. All right. Noted. Put down. Emma.
Yeah.
ESPN. You guys taking Juneteenth off?
No, we're not.
What? Why not?
Emma's a bad boss, too.
I guess so. I guess the poison drips through, as they say.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about the...
And we're going to take off 3 days for July 4th.
I know.
Yeah, we're doing Charlie Kirk proud. Actually, we're
we're just giving you a little bit of crap, but I don't care that much. We do have a nice July 4th time off. So, Also, on ESPN, we'll be speaking about Bradley Beal going to Phoenix. More NBA conversation ahead of both the draft next week and then free agency at the end of the month. Matt highlighted this amazing Dwayne Wade interview that I want to play on the show about his experience being the father of a trans kid. And also Rob Manfred stepping in crap with the Oakland A's and how disgusting that entire debacle is. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
V says, wait a minute, didn't you guys take off Juneteenth last year? Did we?
No.
It was on a weekend, I believe.
Yeah, we did.
Oh yeah, okay. That explains it.
Yeah.
Matt.
Left for Reckoning, we did a Sunday show where we talked. Well, David did a little bit of a reclamation of a radical country history, and we also talked about UPS's union strike authorization and the DOJ's report on Minneapolis's racist cops. So you'll be surprised to learn that they're petulant and lawless in a sustained way that, when you talk about, oh yeah, we've made steps forward and we're working to partner. No, they've absolutely. I mean, to name one thing, they just stopped the day after they murdered George Floyd, basically gathering race and I believe gender-related data. So we're not going to gather that on stop. So all the DOJ's info into how racist the Minneapolis Police Department was collected with the obstruction of the actual department that continues to this day.
In one report, they supposedly maced an unarmed person that they were monitoring or tailing with no preconceived reason for doing so, with a DOJ monitor in their car.
I read that. That's nuts.
It's unbelievable.
What do you mean we're not allowed to do it? It's just...
We're at work. We're just doing our jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy.
All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to go short today.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Should I have done ESPN on Tuesday?
Yeah. I can't believe you're doing it.
It's pretty horrible. Yeah. I mean, me and Sam were talking about it earlier.
I mean, now
I really.
Bradley marches out.
I believe she's making Bradley come to work.
Yeah, Bradley marches out of the studio.
All right. Well, I guess stay tuned. I'm going to think about it.
Nice.
646-257-3920 is the number. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million.